thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Mark DePue. I'm the Director of Oral History here at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. And tonight we have a very special program for you. Title IX, landmark legislation that changed American society. And it really has in so many ways, and we're going to learn so much more about that as we go through here. Wanted to start off with a quick note to our teachers, and I will read this. You will receive credit for full length of the session as long as you stay for the entire session and then complete the evaluation that you'll see after the end of the program itself. And I think it's appropriate we start with reading the text of Title IX. It's very brief and it's powerful. No person in the United States shall, based on sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. It's that simple. And then it's complicated once, and I'm sure we'll learn so much more as we go through this. It's something that really has had a dramatic impact on American society ever since. And the way I always look at it is, for those of you who are young, imagine your grandmothers, or maybe even your mothers, never had the opportunities that you have now to participate in sports. I wanted to give a little bit of an origin of how this all started in the first place, and it's the lead into our introduction to Ellen Barges, who's sitting on my far left over there. Dr. Ellen Barges, in 1977, played in the very first girls' state basketball tournament in Illinois. I didn't meet Ellen until 2009 when she and I were both attending a oral history conference in Louisville, Kentucky. And I was looking through the list of things that I had an option to go sit in on that particular hour period of time. And I said, oh, Title IX, that looks like it might be interesting. So I went to the session. And that's where I heard Ellen for the first time talking about the oral history interviews that she had done with other people who were involved in those early years of girls basketball in Illinois. We struck up a conversation afterwards, and as we say, the rest is history. I said, okay, if I'm going to accept these interviews as part of our collection here in the oral history program, I want to interview you. And we did that a couple months later, and boy, was that fun, and I learned an awful lot about it. So that's kind of the origin of this thing, and ever since I thought it would be a great program to do and to highlight that. She was a coach, and after graduating from college, he was a coach at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte for many years. In 2014, Ellen, you went on and you earned your PhD from the University of Illinois. So, and you are just retired from being the Equal Opportunity and Access Officer and the Title IX Coordinator, which is certainly appropriate for tonight, at St. Cloud State University. Next person on our panel. And the way I look at this, we had our dream team. This was the first team that we wanted to have in the very beginning as we put this together. Jackie Joyner-Kersee, one of America's greatest athletes, especially a track and field athletes, participated in the 1984, the 1988, the 1992 Olympics. In the process, won 3 golds, 1 silver, and 2 bronze medals. And in 2005, Sports Illustrated for Women voted her the greatest female athlete in American history. Not too many people can say that. So that's the caliber of people we have involved with this today. She's also renowned for being an ambassador for women's sports and also for civil rights and other issues as well. We have 2 women who were involved with writing the seminal book on Title IX, and it has an appropriate title. Title IX is the name of the book. We have Dr. Linda Jean Carpenter, Emeritus Professor from the City University of New York's Brooklyn College, co-author of this book that I just mentioned. She also is a member of the New York State and United States Supreme Court Bar. That's very impressive. Earned her JD from Fordham University and her PhD from the University of Southern California. We have Dr. R. Vivian Acosta, the other co-author of the book Title IX. Dr. Acosta has been involved with Title IX issues and gender equity issues for the last 30 plus years. She is the former president of the National Association for Girl and Women in Sports. And she and Dr. Carpenter spent 27 years in a longitudinal national study of the status of women in intercollegiate sports. So these two women are the experts on the subject of Title IX. And finally, we have our moderator tonight, Peggy Kuczynski. She is recently retired from being a reporter at Chicago's NBC5 station, where you started in 2000. Before that time, I know you were a native Chicagoan, grew up on the northwest side of town and played basketball, and were a all-city and an all-state basketball player, and received your BS in radio and television from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. And before arriving in Chicago, received 2 national Emmys, and later on went on to receive 10 Emmys from local and Midwest awards. And I should say also that you reported on Olympics for, let's see, 1992 Summer Olympics, the Winter Olympics, and I think the 2000 Olympics as well, if I remember correctly. So you can see the caliber of the people we have here, but you're not here to listen to me. So Peggy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. So I want to first begin by reminding our viewers, please, to use your Q&A function to ask questions. We would love to open it up to questions to all of our viewers at home. Use the Q&A function so that we can get your question in towards the end of the program. I'd like to begin by taking a look at the history of Title IX, its effects, its intentions, and how it came to be in the state of Illinois. Amazingly, there were girls' basketball teams here in Illinois high schools back in the early 1900s. But in 1907, the Illinois High School Association banned 300 high school basketball teams, girls' teams, due to being unladylike. Illinois was the first state association to ban girls' sports in the early 1900s. Gradually, non-contact sports were allowed because they thought women could handle it. Golf, tennis, archery. Now, it is said, nearly 70 years later, that Title IX and the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, combined are the two most important and have had the biggest effect on women in the past 100 years. So let's talk about Title IX. And I'd like to bring in our most decorated athlete of this century, Jackie Joyner-Kersee. Jackie, you're considered one of the greatest female athletes of this century, and yet you may have never had the privilege to perform, to compete, or take part in sports without Title IX. We're right around the same age. I remember you in high school. So I'm curious how you feel about the opportunity to perform and what Title IX actually did for you. Were there no opportunities prior to? And what were the opportunities before? I'm guessing 72, you were in grammar school. So what was it like before and after Title IX for you?
For me, before Title IX, I was a young girl, just wanted to participate and not knowing the opportunities that was there. And so throughout elementary school and junior high school, we participated, but not knowing that there were certain things we could or could not do. And so once we got to high school and knowing that Title IX had passed in 1972, that even then, because my mother was thinking about pulling me from sports because we weren't allowed to practice, because we only had one gymnasium, and the boys practiced first, and then we would have to come back at 6:30 in the evening. And my mom was like, no, you're not going to be going back to no practice. And so, and even though the law had been passed, so our coaches start to make sure that they not only knew the law had passed, but also make sure it was implemented, and some of the changes start to occur. And so for us, that's when the education about what it really meant, about what Title IX really stood for. And for me, the opportunity to eventually get a scholarship and be able to go to college of choice was truly a blessing, because in elementary school, I wanted to do sports, and the gym teacher wouldn't allow me to do sports at all. I could be a cheerleader, but I couldn't do anything athletically. And I didn't understand why. So the only time I got an opportunity to run was if I was a part of the summer youth program.
So that was in your grammar school years. I remember for me in 1975-ish, I wanted to play basketball, and I was in 6th grade, and there was no girls basketball team. And my mom said to me, "You go and tell them that you're trying out for the boys basketball team." And so I walked over there with my powder blue Chuck Taylors, shown over my shoulder. And I said, "I'm trying out for the basketball team." And the coach said, "Oh, no, Peggy, that's next year. We have girls in 7th and 8th grade, but the boys had 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Okay, so grammar school was one thing. 3 years later, it was a huge difference in high school. Gyms were packed. Everybody went to the games. Jackie, did you see a difference between grammar school and high school with the acceptance of playing sports?
I did. I saw a difference from the standpoint when I did summer youth programming. So when you were in school, it was only our gym teacher would be our coaches, and it was only for track. And so I played basketball through the AAU program. So I didn't play basketball in what they call middle school. For us was junior high school. So, but I would play through the community center. And then once we got to high school, most of the girls who was on the track team, we also played basketball as well. But when I was much younger, the great thing about the boys was that it didn't matter, girl or boy, they just select you because they knew you were good. I didn't know I was good, but they wanted you to be on their team. But I think that transitional time, it was very, very important, because Coach Nino Fenoy, who coached me from the time I was 9 years of age, who is still in my life, who is still the high school coach of girls track and field at East St. Louis Senior High School now, that when we were coming up, it was both boys and girls, and the boys coach decided that they no longer wanted to coach girls. And Coach Fenoy said there is a place for girls to participate in sports. And that's how I was able to continue to do something I just love doing, because a coach said, "No, girls can't do this. We're not going to cut the girls program. I'm going to find a way to help these young girls who just like showing up, in 100-degree weather, wanting to run, or going into a gymnasium without air conditioning and playing basketball or volleyball."
Wow. Let's bring in Ellen Barges, who played on the first ever women's girls Illinois basketball tournament championship here in the state of Illinois. Ellen, the difference for you, because you were an immediate recipient of Title IX, but you were also part of the class that didn't have Title IX.
Yes, I was on that cusp.
What was the difference like for you? What was it like before and then after?
It was like somebody flipped on a switch. I think a lot of people I have talked to over the years, like opening a door, letting a light in. For me personally, I came from an athletic family. I was very competitive. My first sport that I ever did was swimming when I was younger, because in Hinsdale, swimming was very popular.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that was the only sport girls could play. And when I got to high school, we had some PE teachers that were from other states, particularly Linda Gollin from Pennsylvania. She went to Butler College, and she had experienced some of these other activities. She was our first basketball coach, and she didn't treat us like we didn't know what a basketball was. But she was only there for a year before she, stopped out to have a family. And we had another coach come in, Linda Slober, and she had coached at, I should know this, in towards the cities, not St. Joe's, but it'll come to me. And she kind of got us going, but we only had one gym in our high school too. And I went to a big high school. It was a 5A high school.
Right.
And there was one gym. And this is a theme that comes across in the interviews that I've done consistently, access to facilities. And like most basketball coaches, our basketball coach did not want to lose time in the gym because he had 4 or 5 different teams. And we had a JV team that was small and a medium-sized varsity team. But we could only get in the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, that was not a time that I was really awake. But that's when we practiced.
Right.
I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a Gatling gun. And
At 6 a.m.
at 6 a.m. But we persisted. We had some good advice, but they did things that were antithetical to promoting women and to providing them the tools that they need. I don't mean to sound ungrateful. We were thrilled with the opportunity, and we had some fabulous athletes. And to all of my teammates out there, I think that you all had experienced the same kind of change, an opportunity, and we worked hard at it. And our junior year, we went to the state tournament. So we were one of the top 8 schools in the country. I can't remember if it was 8 or if it was smaller than that. And that was at the Horton Fieldhouse in Bloomington Normal. And they didn't move to U of I until, sometime later. But without our PE program, without the dedicated coaches, and they were learning on the fly too.
Right.
So, I would frequently walk into the PE area, and you would see coaching gymnastics or coaching archery. Well, archery was a little more, that was almost done, but coaching softball, and how dedicated they were to go back and educate themselves about how to do these things. We had a male coach my senior year, but that's the only male coach I had. And they were all very dedicated.
Well, all of a sudden it got serious. So let's bring in our experts. And I'd like to ask Linda and Vivian, how did we get to Title IX? I mentioned the numbers that there were 300 high school programs playing girls sports, girls basketball that were canceled in the early 1900s. What happened in those 70 years? And what precluded Title IX? What was the impetus to bring this emotion and this movement back?
They muted.
Linda,
Yeah.
there we go. Linda and Vivian, there you go. Help us understand what brought us to Title IX.
We heard your question. Oh, we're just saying that we're a whole lot older than any of you. We are ancient.
So
I was in high school in the 50s. Can you believe that? So I'm gonna let Linda speak first and then I'll chime in whenever.
So we never got in the gym in junior high or high school. There was a sign on the door that said no girls allowed. And one day in a fit of, I don't know, bravado or something, I snuck into the gym. And I still, all these years later, remember the smell of the gym. It wasn't bad, it just smelled like a gym, boys' gym. Um, but I saw this space and what it sounded like and felt like, and I thought, how wonderful it would have been to have had an experience to play in the gym, either basketball or volleyball, and not on blacktop outside. We had no inter-school opportunities in those days either. So that was long before Title IX. And I think Vivian's experience was much the same. The sport experience that we had was through physical education and teachers who were willing to provide something special at lunch hour or after school without getting any pay for it. And those were the days that led up a little bit to Title IX. I think we all knew that there was a gym and we were not allowed, that the boys were going places and we were not invited. But it was the way the world was. And so I think your question about what motivated Title IX, a lot of what motivated it had nothing to do with sport. It had to do with access to graduate school. It had access to classes like physics. In high school, I was the first girl ever allowed to take a physics class. What do girls need with physics? Fortunately, my mom, who was a PE major in her college days at UCLA, went to the principal and made that case that girls should be allowed to play. There were people like Bernie Sandler, who had applied to a graduate school program and whose resume was better than the fellows that were applying. And she was told, we already have our quota of women. And she, I think, if you've met her, is a very mild-mannered, grandmotherly sort of person. But there was fire in her, and she started walking the halls of Congress along with some helpful members of Congress, Birch Bayh, Nancy Mink, who heard her story, and Title IX was drafted, and no one at that point noticed or realized that it would apply to sport as well. If they had, it probably would not have landed on President Nixon's desk for signing. So he signed it June 23rd, 1972. And the world changed, as you're saying, although not without some hurdles and some bumps and some losses, and never being allowed to declare victory for any of the fights that an awful lot of women participated in.
Jean, let me jump in here for a second here, because I want to ask Vivian this. So in 1972, this was an educational amendment. This was 57% college students were male at that time, 43% were female. In 2010, there are more women now in college than men. 57% of college students are women as of 10 years ago, and more women are now getting doctorates than men. So Title IX has worked for educational equality, which is what it was intended for in the beginning. So Vivian, let me ask you this. How did it make the turn towards sports?
I think that Title IX affected sports rather quickly. It affected women's sports and men's sports enormously. It was a boon for women's sports. They were able to participate in great numbers. Where Linda and I taught at Brooklyn College, there were no sports for women. There was a great big huge intramural program, but not team sports at all. And slowly we had to initiate those team sports or individual sports varsity sports, if you will, into the program. And the men didn't like it. I remember going to visit with the men's athletic director, with the chair of the women's physical education, and me. I was the women's athletic director at the time. And we told him what Title IX meant financially. Now, he was a very mild-mannered guy. I liked Charles, but his face got all red. He practically jumped out of the chair, and he said, no, that can't happen because it will ruin the men's sports.
Yep.
We said, no, it won't. He didn't believe us. But Charles came to his senses and he said, okay, we'll go ahead. And that's when Brooklyn College started having varsity teams. It was a good move for everyone. We had coaches, but they were physical educators. They weren't trained as coaches. I was a coach. I wasn't trained as a coach. I coached basketball, both varsity and junior varsity at the same time. And I also coached, get this, badminton, men's and women's badminton. And both the basketball teams and the badminton coach, we had great success. And the students in the teams, they had never traveled before. And because I was the women's athletic director, I was able to have them have opportunities to travel. And I made sure they traveled, not only in the New York City area, but outside of state. We went to Connecticut, we went to New Jersey, we went to upstate New York, as they say. So I gave those kids an opportunity to travel. And some of those students at Brooklyn College, they had never been to Manhattan, which was just across the river. And I asked them why. And they said, well, we have everything we need in our neighborhoods. We don't need to go to Manhattan.
Mm.
So, yeah. So it was interesting. I hope that they learned from their experiences in traveling. I think they did. Their eyes were opened that there were more opportunities for them in other places other than Brooklyn.
There were about 16,000 college women athletes when Title IX was enacted. And they're now over 200,000.
Mhm.
And I put some numbers together today, which I found interesting, because the change is so massive from 72 to now, and the fight has been so hard that you forget to look at the success that's been made.
Mhm.
If we take the number of high school girl athletes and high school boy athletes, as they were before Title IX, the year Title IX was going to be enacted, and then see the excess athletes of every year for the females between 1972 and 2017, which is the latest data available for that, there are 96 million more spots that have existed from 72 to 2017 for female high school athletes than ever existed before. That doesn't mean that the number is now 96 million,
Right.
but the total number of girls and women in high school that have had the opportunity, thanks to Title IX, to learn about themselves, to have leadership opportunities, to learn how to evaluate risk, to grow up with less likelihood of being in an abusive relationship or an unwanted pregnancy. 96 million more opportunities for a girl to have a slot on a team and gain those wonderful benefits, thanks to the people pre-1972 that finally got fed up, like Bernice Sandler, and the members of Congress that heard them and the people that were a little bit asleep at the switch and let it pass without realizing it applied to sport too.
Which is okay. Linda, you're a girl after my own heart because I was crunching some numbers as well. And when Vivian says that the floodgates open, she's not kidding. According to the National Federation of High Schools, in 1971-72, this is right before Title IX, there were 294,000 girls playing high school sports across the country. The next year, immediately after Title IX was enacted, it almost tripled to 817,000. In 1 year, it almost tripled. As of 2019, here in Illinois, we have 142,000 girls playing sports at the high school level, which is the 5th most in the United States. There are 3.4 million girls at that level playing sports. 49 colleges, universities in the state of Illinois alone that have women's college athletic programs. So let me ask Jackie, before you went to college on a scholarship, could you ever dream in grammar school and elementary school that an athletic scholarship was possible? How did you even find out that this was a possibility for you as a young female athlete?
Oh, being in grammar school, and it wasn't possible. My parents couldn't afford for me to go to school. And it wasn't until I was 14 and I saw the 76 Olympic Games on television. And so at that time, they were put to the university. So Evelyn Ashford, UCLA. And I was like, wow, maybe there's a possibility, you know, but then you start with scholarships, and I played pretty good basketball. And so when the opportunity presented itself, I got a basketball scholarship to UCLA, but I always knew in my heart that I wanted to make the Olympic team in track and field. So no, it wasn't possible because I didn't see a lot of girls who looked like me, who was doing what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until the Olympics where you saw women in all different kind of sports that, wow, it's possible, you know, and then 2 years later, I see Annie Myers and Anita Ortega win the AIAW championship in basketball. I mean, where they played against Maryland, you know, and UCLA came up again. So it's like, whoa, that must be a great school for girls, you know. And even though I had read about the Shea sisters from, I think it was Norfolk State but during those years, you didn't really see a lot of women on television. And it wasn't until the Olympics, the Nadia Comaneci, and everybody thought they could be a gymnast, even though I'm 5'10", can't do a backwards handspring if I wish I could. So, so the possibility, the possibility was not there. And all the women who I read about who came before me, you know, Beja Harriet, Wilma Rudolph, and then when women were only allowed to play half court, you know, 3-on-3 and in skirts, or, you know, so you know,
Right.
how blessed and grateful I am because you know, the two icons here, you know, telling us the history of how all of this happened. So
I remember my mother in the 50s played 6-on-6 basketball at Alvernia High School on the northwest side of Chicago. She was the one who encouraged me to play sports. So Ellen, I'm curious, for you, pre-Title IX, who encouraged you to play sports? Where did you get your motivation from?
I come from a very competitive family. Just about anything could be a competition. My dad was an athlete. He was a football player at West Virginia University. He was drafted by 2 major leagues baseball teams. When he went to tryouts at the Dodgers, he got hit. He was a left-handed first baseman. He got hit he got hit by a line drive in the mouth, and he lost about 5 teeth. And he thought, maybe I should go back to grad school, which is what he did. But my uncles, both my Uncle Dick and my Uncle Joe, his brothers, they played in college as well. They didn't play at a Division I school, but they played at Morris Harvey, and I can't remember where Uncle Dick went to school, but in Pennsylvania. My family's from Pennsylvania, and we compete about, who gets the biggest fish, who takes the longest time to do it. If it was fun, it was competitive. And my mom was competitive. She was game for that, but she was from a different era.
Mhm.
So, and I think in one of my interviews, I say this to Mark is, I wanted to play catch, and my brother wouldn't play catch with me, and my dad wasn't around. And my mom, who was pretty game, she says, well, I'll play catch with you. And I was like, okay. The only mitt that was there was my dad, who was a first baseman, and he was left-handed. Well, she was
Uh-oh.
not left-handed.
Uh-oh.
And I threw a ball and it hit her right in the face. She never got the mitt up. So
Yeah.
she goes, I don't think this is a very good idea. I said, okay. But I swam competitively when I was young. Like I said, that was really the only thing that was acceptable. And when I got to high school, it was really my friends and the PE staff primarily. Like I say, particularly Linda Gollin. She had an experience that a lot of the women who had graduated from Illinois or Illinois State was a little bit different at that period of time, that had experienced play days and some of the things that you would have experienced at that college level. And if you, my interview with Lori Ramsey, really, she had a good story about, you have GAA, which is Girls Athletic Association.
I remember it fondly.
And you would have been right at the end of that period.
Mhm.
And we didn't have GAA at Hinsdale South. But they hired younger teachers as some of their other teachers were retiring. I think they saw it down the pike that this was going to be the case, that there was going to be athletics for girls. And we just went and worked hard, and they didn't hold back. But Ramsey's story was, she was the GAA president and advisor at in Peoria. I can't remember where it was, but she had built her GAA program into 300 players.
Wow.
And this would have been before Title IX. It was probably 70, probably 69, 71, somewhere in there. And so she needed more space, gym space. And so she went to the wrestling coach and said, my program has grown to 300 students and I need more gym time. And he said, well, that's all well and good, but for decades, and as long as I know, the sport of wrestling has provided young men and boys the opportunity to explore a sport and to grow, and how much it means to their character. So no, I'm not.
Wow.
I'm not giving up any gym space. So she said, I don't know if she's still alive, but she said, I went back to my office and I was smart enough not to go down. I wrote a letter and I was smart enough not to go down and give it to him in person. I put it in his box, and I put my resignation to the principal in the principal's box, and I resigned the next day. And she said, you want to know what I said in my letter? I said, oh yeah. And she goes, I wrote in red ink, what about the character of the girls?
Of the girls.
And that was, I think that our PE people would have done the same things, but we still had to practice very early. And it was, I don't know, science has proven that getting teenagers up and on a floor at 6 in the morning or in a pool or whatever it is probably not the best practice. And it was only because there were boys in there. It wasn't that it was, it was open to the community or anybody else, but they wouldn't even dream of having a rotating schedule. Just wouldn't even think about it. So now, and I coached at the high school and junior high school level, and I've coached at Division I. I've coached Olympians, I've coached All-Americans, and we didn't ever have those problems. Of course, that was, a different era.
Yeah. So as we are taping this, it's March 2021. And just a week ago, during the NCAA
Yep.
tournament, we had a female basketball player from the Oregon basketball team, basketball team, showing a video on social media of the discrepancies between the men's workout facilities and the women's workout facilities. And the men had an entire ballroom filled with workout equipment for their weight room. And the women had one little measly set of workout equipment.
A pyramid.
With an open empty room, right? So back in 1975, the federal government did issue rules to the colleges, elementary and secondary schools, calling for equal opportunity at all levels. And that is from PE to intramurals to club to varsity teams. This is back in 1975. It's all right to have separate men's and female teams, of course, but the teams and their facilities should fairly reflect the relative interests and abilities of the male and the female students. So let's ask Linda and Vivian, how is it that in 1975, the federal government issued this to make sure everyone understood Title IX, and yet in 2021, something so simple could be overlooked and is still happening 50 years later?
Mute.
Yeah, sorry. The only way to explain it is that some people do not want to learn. Certainly there's been ample time, ample publicity, ample hand slapping. And yet it's pretty basic, especially from those pictures of the pile of handbells versus a whole gym full of equipment. That there's something wrong. One can argue little points of Title IX, although they're well settled in the law, but that is so obvious. The only explanation, especially since it was the NCAA who permitted that oversight or made that oversight, if you characterize it as an oversight, it just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. There's no question about it, but it happens on the school level as well, not just when it's something that's very public. It is an ingrained decision by some people to dismiss and demean anything that relates to being female. And I think that becomes a valid illustration of it. Just those two pictures, the fully equipped space and the empty space. I think those same people fail to realize that Title IX is not a zero-sum game. When I spoke earlier about 96 million additional slots for girls to have the opportunity to learn through sport, in that same time period, there were 10 million more for boys on the high school level. This hasn't been either gift to the women and starve the men. It doesn't work that way. I have no explanation for why, except that it made a very good jumping off spot for discussions like we're having today, because it is so very obvious that it's wrong.
Vivian, can you explain how Title IX has evolved to ensure that there is equality that is proportionate to the undergraduate student body of universities? Can you just explain, because so many people say, well, there's a football team, how can we possibly make it equal for the women? Explain what the intent of Title IX is in terms of the proportion of your undergraduate student body.
Well, Title IX says that there's supposed to be benefits for the underrepresented group of people, and that's of course the women. And there are many benefits that come from sport. We all know that because we all participated in sport. And so we know what the benefits are. But unfortunately, the men, and still today, although the women are getting many, many more opportunities than they did when I was in college or in high school, they are not willing to say that the women can get benefits too. I was really impressed with the basketball players at the NCAA, the women basketball players at the NCAA, when they complained and they showed pictures of what they had in their gyms or in their prep areas and what the men had. They had the gumption to get up and say, look what they're giving to us and look what they're giving to the guys. What's wrong here? Why does this disparity still exist? Go ahead.
I think that their moms might have been Title IX participants. What do you think?
Right?
Yeah.
You asked specifically about the proportionality, which early on got a lot of press. It's well settled now, but if it's in relation to the student body, and you quoted some numbers at the very beginning of 57% of the student body being males back in the day, and now it's reversed. So 57% of the participants in athletics, assuming that everybody wants to participate, should be women. And there are 3 ways of meeting the equity in opportunities to participate, and that's one of them. If you can show that 57% of the athletes of your student body population, that same percentage is represented in the athletics program, then you don't have to worry on that basis about Title IX. But most schools can't do that, especially now that there are more women on campus. The NCAA liked that at the beginning when the men were in the majority. They don't care for that particular option anymore. The other 2 relate to if you have no women that are interested or have the ability to participate, then you don't need to force them to run track or play basketball. But that is not the case on high schools, elementary schools, and college campuses. The women are there and their desires are not being met. So the only leftover one, the third option for schools that can't meet the first 2, is that they can show a history and continuing practice of upgrading the women's program. And schools that started early, soon after the mandatory compliance date with Title IX, which was 1978, they didn't have too much problem with that. Doing it all in 1 year is a problem because you can't
It's
build
hard.
a
Yeah.
softball diamond in a year. You can't find,
Right.
that sort of thing. So in general, there is great inequity still in participation and in the other areas as well. The other areas, all but one, are judged on the basis of benefit. So let me give you a quick example just to clear up, because a lot of people have confusion about this. A football player, his uniform and pads and helmet cost a lot of money. Let's just pick $1,000. I'm sure it's more than that these days, but let's say $1,000. A tennis player doesn't cost so much. They need a good tennis racket or 2 or 3. They need some good sneakers. They need a tennis outfit. But the cost to outfit both in a similar quality is very different. Title IX does not require you to spend $1,000 on the tennis player just because you spend $1,000 on the football player. They are only looking at the benefit. So if the tennis player gets a new uniform twice a year, the football players shouldn't get a new uniform and 3 practice uniforms every week, to make
Right.
it really exaggerated. So everything except financial aid is considered by benefit. If the men fly to games, the women shouldn't be taking a beat up old school bus.
Right.
The only other is financial aid, and that is something that if I had my druthers, I would change, but the financial aid is on the dollar.
Linda, thank you for clearing that up. I think that's a big topic that people don't understand when it comes to comparing a football program to, say, a women's tennis program. Another point of Title IX that is often overlooked is the intent of Title IX to get rid of stereotypes. And Cheryl Hinman, one of our viewers tonight, has asked this question about the stereotypes. And this is very important because this was a very important part of the intent of Title IX. As I mentioned, back in the early 1900s, when so many women were playing sports, and then they were told it was not ladylike, that women could not handle the exertion, that women were just not as interested in sports. And the intent of Title IX is the more you expose and give the opportunity, the more you see that that actually is not true, that they enjoy, they participate, and they want to take part. So Jackie, let me ask you this. I mentioned how I would wear my Chuck Taylors. I went to a Catholic school, Resurrection High School, northwest side of Chicago. I would wear my Chuck Taylors with my uniform skirt. I was considered a tomboy back in the late 70s. I don't know about you. Were you considered a tomboy just because you played sports? Whereas, thank goodness, the evolution of Title IX, we now call girls who wear their gym shoes to school might be called an athlete.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Oh, yes, I was called a tomboy, but it didn't bother me, but not realizing it was stereotypical, for me, I was a student athlete, and at times during the summer, just an athlete, and so, but I never lost focus or let that kind of connotation, steer me away from athletics, and I climbed trees, now with my mom, she had a problem with it. I had to wear a dress. She didn't want me to put the shorts because I'd take my little purse and put my little shorts in my little pocketbook, we would call it at that time. And then when I would get to school, I would put the shorts underneath my dress because she was saying, at home, you bend over a lot instead of squatting down, stop bending over, So so for me, I welcome it and dared anybody who wanted to challenge me to go, differently, but I do want to add something to when you were talking about the NC2As with the women's basketball. And I think what I didn't have when I was coming up and what the young ladies, what we all have today, have its pluses and minuses, is social media, because it gave them an opportunity to have a voice, because this is happening a lot more. But at the pinnacle of their big event, they were able to shine a light that brought the world into how women's athletics and athletes are still being treated. So just imagine what's happening on the high school level when they create these massive gymnasium, these locker rooms, and they're leaving out girls, still doing it today.
I love that you brought that up, because that is another part of Title IX that people don't realize is it's about the opportunity, the exposure, and the equal access. If the boys have Friday night lights for football and Saturday for college football and Sunday for NFL, is it equal opportunity for the women's sports to be played or aired on TV on a Tuesday night? Not necessarily. So I'm curious, Ellen, did you see the difference with the boys getting the top-notch treatment when it came to exposure, media, the best primetime slots to play, and the girls and women playing on the leftover time slots, which naturally is going to lead to lower viewership?
Yes, unequivocally. And what Jackie said about travel and in particular caught my ear. When I was at UNC Charlotte, I was an assistant women's basketball coach and the head softball coach. And when the softball team traveled, you need a certain number of people on a field, on a diamond, to play baseball, softball. And for the first 2 years, I think I didn't have an assistant coach. So frequently I had players who drove the other van, or one of my friends would come with me on the trip and drive the vehicle. It was going from Charlotte to Tampa in a van is not a fun trip. But one of my best memories also comes from that too. And I know that the players enjoyed some of those trips, but you know, I remember listening to the Duke Carolina game when Christian Laettner hit that last second shot. The whole van rocked. But mostly because Carolina got beat. But it was the same way in high school. You know, sometimes when I was coaching in Macomb, Illinois, I was a high school coach, and we would have just a regular school bus, which is bigger than a van. So we'd have JV and varsity team on there. And it seemed like half the time there was no heat. And basketball, as you know, is a winter sport. And there's not much that stops the wind out there. And it'd be bitter cold, and the heater could never keep up. You'd go in and you'd look at the boys' locker room at Alito versus the girls' locker room at Alito, and you're like, what is this? And I have already been through all that both as a player and as a coach at UNC Charlotte. So I wasn't happy about it. But if you say anything and you're a coach, it opens doors, but the wrong way. Don't let it hit you in the backside on the way out, or, you know, shut up. And I think that there is still some of that. And I haven't been in coaching for quite a while, but and Mark always laughs at this. I brought it with me, but I forgot to bring it today. When I was in high school, my brother was 2.5 years older than me. And he played football and he was a tennis player. So he played 2 sports. I played 4 sports. He had 4 varsity letters. I have 8 charms for a charm bracelet. We weren't allowed to wear letter jackets.
No.
We didn't get letters at all. And I keep that. It'll probably be buried with me. But that idea that girls cannot be feminine and competitive at the same time still exists.
Absolutely.
And when I look, I said to my wife the other day, we were watching, oh God, it's my favorite time of year. You know, it's tournament time.
Yeah.
And I said, did you see that girl's eyelashes? I mean, they were like up to here on her, my eyebrows. And they were big, fluffy things. I'm like, how can she see to shoot? And part of that is me, because I've never worn anything like that. I don't know how that would impair my vision, but that's how she wants to express herself, and that's fine.
Right.
But it took a long time to get there.
Yeah, right. So the Obama administration found that schools needed to increase publicity for women's programs, exactly what we're talking about. So sports information departments increased to include women's sports information directors and assistants. Let me ask Linda and Vivian again, how important was this clarification of Title IX recently to help increase the exposure and the opportunity? Again, I think that what people don't understand is it's not that people don't want to watch the women's sports, it's that if you don't have the opportunity to see them at the same rate that we are given a media influx of male sports, then you're naturally going to go towards what the media feeds you. So how important, Linda and Vivian, was it when the Obama administration really encouraged schools to increase publicity for their women's sports departments and thus the increase in sports information directors?
I think it's really important for the sports information directors to do their jobs equitably. Because if people don't know about both programs, then they will naturally watch just the men or the boys programs. So the SIDs are really, really important to do their job correctly. There are many sports information directors that are now women. There didn't used to be any women as sports information directors, but now there are many. So I think it's good for them to be out there and to be doing their jobs and to be able to do it well. Go ahead.
And the study that we did, the 37-year study, the last year is 2014, and we have numbers from those, not more recently, and I'm sure that the numbers have increased, but at that time, 12 out of 100 of the college SIDs were women, which is up from 0 a few years before that. You watch a game, when we were in college, the men's basketball team at our school was awful, but they played to a full field house, and we stood until they made their first basket. You could get really tired standing. They were so bad, but they filled the field house because they had a band, they had cheerleaders, they had giveaways, they had
all kinds of
stuff. When the women played, and they were much better than the men, nobody came because there was no notice that there was a game, there was no band, there was no cheerleading squad, there were no giveaways. You build it and people will come. So the increase in sport information directors that are women and that are, whether they're women or not, the increase in the number that have as their responsibility covering women's sports helps people that had no idea that the sports existed, or that the sports were interesting to watch, or that the women's basketball game is different than the men's basketball game, but just as interesting, or that the women's soccer in the United States could beat the men pretty easily, I would think. But without the publicity, nobody knows. So if you build it, they will come. And that's an important thing to remember in all aspects of sport. And it is one of the required areas for there to be equity.
Exactly. Jackie, let me ask you this. You went from a team sport as a high school and college athlete with a scholarship to UCLA as a basketball player to the track and field, an Olympic sport. What was the difference with the attention that you got as a basketball player and then as an Olympic athlete? Because many would argue that without the Olympics, women's sports and Title IX would not be where it's at today, because so much attention is actually given every 4 years to the Olympics. What was the difference for you that you experienced when many more were playing basketball and then you went to an Olympic sport?
I would say that it was almost if you were on a level playing field, because with the Olympic sports, all I ever wanted people to do is have an appreciation for our talents, you know? And so once that appreciation was there, and then the markability, because now you see where you in the prime time slot, you know, they're talking about female athletes in the Olympic sports, which bring a lot of attention. And so when I played basketball at UCLA, you know, I left high school and, you know, we were top in basketball, track, you know, we struggled with the volleyball. And so when I got to UCLA and we would play our games before the men, now I wasn't accustomed to people sitting outside like they were at Poly Pavilion. So I'm like, wow, they come to see us play, not knowing they really come to see the men. But what it did, it introduced us to our student body. And when they, for whatever reason, switched out and started having our basketball games, then the student body was coming and supporting us. But it was us playing before the men basketball team, you know, I'm like, wow, all these people sitting out here. Because, you know, they were coming early so they could get a seat, you know. But I can honestly say that with the Olympic sports, it really put women athletics out there from the standpoint of more appreciation. I just know from '96, I thought there was a greater appreciation for all the women team sports, you know, and it made a big difference, you know, when, and now, I mean, I still feel we got a lot, you know, we have accomplished a lot, but we still got a lot more to, you know, to go from the standpoint of not just making it every those 4 years, why we can't be the conversation every day, every month, every year, you know, not for just a special event that you talk about the greatness of some of the Olympic sports. What about some of the sports that we don't often see as much as you might see on a regular basis, athletes that are participating.
Jackie, thank you. You just gave me the perfect transition as we go to our final few minutes. The future of Title IX. There is no doubt that it has been overwhelmingly successful with its intent. One area that we have a question from one of our attendees online is asking about transgender athletes. And Title IX under the Obama administration, in his infamous Dear Colleague letter to schools, did require schools to allocate for facilities like bathrooms, showers, dormitories for transgender athletes. The Trump administration then did revoke that. So what is the future for transgender athletes, and as it pertains to Title IX? If I can, please ask Linda and Vivian to address that. And then I would like to go to all of our panelists and ask for your final thoughts on the future of Title IX. So Linda and Vivian, would one of you like to address transgender athletes and the future of Title IX?
Yeah, if I had a crystal ball, it would be very useful for that question. But unfortunately I don't. But I think that it is not a binary issue. The definition of who we are in a gender basis is more than male or female. And in the Olympics, I'm sure that Jackie can remember in Olympic history, there have been instances where people have been barred from competition and competed in an overt way in categories that they did not belong. I'm hoping that the discussion that proceeds from this reevaluation of the issue, because that's what Biden's executive letter asked for. It didn't make a decision, it asked for a reevaluation of it, is that we look at the benefits that can be reached from sport, and that we re-examine our definitions of fairness and try and find a way that works for everybody. I know that there are people on one side that, oh my goodness, my daughter's going to be in a dressing room with, and the guys are going to be, my daughter might not even show up because the guys will win everything, or the people that have grown up biologically as a fellow, and that it's just all over the map. And I think we need to discuss as a society the notion of gender to begin with, and come to terms with that, and then find ways that provide for the greatest possible benefit to the greatest number of people the ability to participate in athletics. And there's got to be enough of us in the world that are smart enough and whose hearts are in the right place that answers can be found that work for everybody. I wish I could give you an answer,
Yeah,
but I can't.
that's
But
okay.
I hope for the best.
Vivian, do you have some final thoughts on the future of Title IX?
Guys, I'm really, really grateful for Title IX. It has changed sport in many, many, many ways. It certainly has changed sport for females. It wasn't in existence when I was in high school. And even in college, it wasn't in existence for me. I'm grateful that I went to schools where the leaders in the various departments of sport were visionary, and they provided wonderful sporting activities for all of us. I think the future will be even greater. I think more and more little girls are going to be playing, and they're going to progress as they go through sport, and they will enjoy it just as we have. Sport is wonderful. It does great things for all of us. And I am very grateful that I was able to participate in sport. I'm very, very grateful that I was able to be a professor of sport and athletics. It gave me a wonderful career. And I'm sure that those young women who choose to go into sport will have a wonderful future for themselves in sport.
Ellen Barges, your final thoughts on the future of Title IX?
I don't think it's going anywhere. And because it has been next to the 19th Amendment, and most people in my position or our panel would probably say the same thing. Next to the 19th Amendment, which gave the women the right to vote, it is the single most important legislative piece of paper that we have. And it has provided innumerable opportunities. And I just don't see how you eradicate that from our culture. It's too strong, but that does not mean it doesn't need tended and protected, and either most good legislation expands and contracts, it breathes. And we have to give it space to do that. We need to make sure that Title IX affects all of the girls and women. When I was listening to Jackie Joyner talk about one of her responses, I was reminded the very first woman I ever read about as an athlete was Wilma Rudolph. And I had the opportunity to meet her, I don't know, somewhere in Tennessee when I was at probably in Knoxville when we played up there. And I was just overwhelmed. And she's a little bit older than me, but that was the first book I ever read about a woman athlete. And it could have been just as easily Babe Zaharias, but I never met Babe. And meeting her was really powerful. And when I look at our society today and I see not just women, but also how diversity, equity, and inclusion figure into sport and opportunity and success and promulgation, how those things intertwine, it is imperative. It's not just necessary, but it is imperative that Title IX is nurtured and allowed to breathe. And there will be times of contraction,
Yeah.
But they need to be legitimate times of contraction, not, oh, we're behind. So I appreciate the work that all of the people here have done. And I'm just a facilitator because of this conversation and the work, because of how much my life changed through Title IX.
For me, it was seeing Cheryl Miller on Sports Illustrated. And I wanted to go to the Olympics, but no one told me a 5'5" Polish girl from the northwest side of Chicago had little or no chance. So, but that's a whole nother story. Jackie Joyner, Kersey, your final thoughts on Title IX.
My final thoughts are, as the panelists all, have said, as well as what Ellen was saying. And I think that we must continue to continue to strengthen Title IX, and not to forget that it's a way of leveling the playing field, both in sports and as for education, to allow young girls and women to see their dreams become a reality. And so when there are whispers of change, that we must continue to remind people of the history and the struggles and why we're here today. So we don't have to go back to the 1900s, because there are people that do not appreciate what women educators, women athletes, bring to the table. So we must continue to stay strong and united and continue to educate those who are coming behind us to continue to fight this battle. So we don't have to continue to have ongoing conversation why Title IX is important.
And Linda, your final thoughts on the future of Title IX.
I agree with Ellen and Jackie. It's not going anywhere. I worried about it in the last couple of years because it could go away in an instant. All you have to do is take the budget away from the Office for Civil Rights, and there you are. I am heartened that more and more states are developing state Title IX legislation. I know that confuses things a little bit, but I think that protects Title IX, much like the ADA, the American Disabilities Act. Having the same kinds of laws enacted in states has protected the ADA when it was threatened to be dissolved on a federal level. I think that every daughter who now has the chance to play is teaching her parents the value of Title IX. And when she grows up and understands that her own daughter has an opportunity to participate, and she valued her own participation, I hope that she remembers that it comes from Title IX, and to not fail to teach her daughter that women before, just like with the vote, sacrificed a lot to make it happen. This is a gift. It's a gift from generations in the past.
I have to agree with you. And I would just say that my final thoughts are that perhaps the most difficult thing, and maybe the final thing that we need with Title IX, is to change people's will. You have to want to make the changes, not because of the balance sheet, not because of what the guys in the boardroom says, but maybe because there are so many more women who are now at the administrative level getting doctorates more so than men. Maybe those are the women that should be in those decision-making that will change because it is just the right thing to do. I want to thank Ellen Barges. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Linda Jane Carpenter, thank you so much. Dr. R. Vivian Acosta, and the greatest female athlete of our lifetime, Jackie Joyner Kersey. Thank you, ladies, for all sharing everything with you. And now I'll turn it back over to Mark DePue.
And thank all of you for spending some time with us. I think you got a chance to listen to some very inspiring women talk about their own experiences and a chance to learn a lot. I would remind teachers to go to that chat page and make sure you got yourself the credit for this by filling out that evaluation form. And I'm going to take an opportunity for a shameless plug as well. I would ask all of you, when you have a chance, to go to our webpage, www.oralhistory.illinois.gov. You'll find my interview with Ellen, and it was a blast interviewing you, Ellen, many years ago. It was pure fun for me. We also have two women that I interviewed who played on the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League back in the late 40s, early 1950s. And those two were amazing women to talk to as well. But I'll finish with this. Thank you, Peggy, for doing a superlative job. It would have been me there otherwise, and I wouldn't have done anywhere close as well as you did on the position. And thank all of the panel members for participating as well. And with that, we'll sign off.